So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon session. My name's Kathy Tykolis. I'm the Richmond Art Gallery's Education and Public Programs Coordinator, and I'm really happy to have our two guests with us tonight, artist Kyla Bourgh and Richmond Gallery the director of the Richmond Art Gallery, Shaun Dacey. So thank you everybody out there for zooming in and joining us online from wherever you are tonight. For those of you who are new to the Salon program, it is a monthly series that happens the last Wednesday of each month. And it offers a mix of professional development tips for visual artists and just different ways you can keep on working and keep growing your own art practice. In connection to the monthly sessions, we also host the Richmond Artist Salon Facebook group. And this is a group for local artists in the Lower Mainland to share opportunities, as well as I will often share professional development workshops, open calls for exhibitions, all that sort of thing that other visual artists might be interested in. So please join that. Again, info is on the Richmond Art Gallery website. I just want to welcome my two guests for tonight. So Kyla Bourgh is currently showing her work on the Canada Line as part of the Capture Photography Festival. It's at the Lansdowne Station, in case you want to go check that out or have already seen it. And she worked with Shaun Dacey to develop this installation. So this session actually came about from a suggestion from Shaun, thinking other artists might be interested in hearing this process that they went through. It is such a different way of working compared to preparing for a gallery exhibition versus a public art installation, as well as turning a three-dimensional work into a two-dimensional work. So we thought a lot of you out there would be really interested in this topic. So if you're an artist out there interested in either public art or this process of getting involved with Capture Festival or other sort of more public spaces, please throw in your questions. And again, do that throughout the session. You don't have to wait till the end. So I'll just introduce each person before I disappear. So Kyla is a Vancouver-based artist who grew up in the interior of BC. She received an MFA from Carr University of Art and Design in 2020, a B.Ed at the University of British Columbia in 2001, and a BFA at Okanagan University in 2000. Her practice encompasses curating, social engagement, writing, and text-based practices. And she has been teaching since 2002 and has exhibited nationally and internationally. So welcome, Kyla. Shaun has been the director of the Richmond Art Gallery since fall 2016. Prior to this, his previous positions include curator at the Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver, director-curator of Access Gallery, in Vancouver as well, public programmer at the Burnaby Art Gallery, and youth programs coordinator at Oakville Galleries. Shaun holds a master's degree in critical and curatorial studies from the University of British Columbia. With intros out of the way, I want to welcome you both. Thank you so much for being a part of this artist salon tonight. I am going to disappear into the background and let Shaun take over with questions, and we'll see you at the end of the night tonight. So bye, everybody.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. I see some familiar faces, and you know, I do like in person a lot better, but I'm glad that we can meet in this digital space. But I do hear that we may be meeting in person at our next artist salon. So I do look forward to that. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. I love the concept of artist salon and this idea of a discussion that engages more with practicing artists, or maybe a bit more of a behind the scenes on how things work, and maybe considering some of the struggles that artists work through in the world. So yeah, maybe I'll give some context to begin with, and my interest around this idea of public art. So, you know, running an art gallery, I can't assume that anyone's going to walk into my gallery, and I do really view art galleries as needing to be porous spaces, that you do need to reach out and do things out in your community if you ever want to meet new people. So public art outreach programs is a big part of what we do at Richmond Art Gallery. And this initiative with Capture Festival and Richmond Public Art has existed, I think, since 2017, and it has evolved over the years. So I think now is an interesting moment to think about what it is, and I'm so excited to talk to Kyla tonight about her experience of the project, and maybe to have a conversation more broadly about what that process of creating public art is. So this initiative with Capture Festival, we put out an open call, at least for the last 4 years. So I will say that artists work on a very tight timeline, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but it all started with an open call to artists to submit ideas for the Canada Line, which is the transit system through Richmond. And to really, the last few years, we've been really considering, what are the stories not being told, kind of not being spoken about in Richmond. So it was a very broad and open call. So I want to say we had over 50 applications, and a jury selected two of those to create an installation, and Kyla's was selected as one of them. And I think the jury was really struck by some of the major idea, and I won't go deep into them, I'll let Kyla explain them, but I think the jury found a real connection to perhaps experiences for people in Richmond and affinities to our Richmond community. And I think some topics that are kind of less spoken about or less considered, that whether, in Richmond, so thinking about Steveston and Japanese community, Chinese community, these are long histories, multi-generational, and really thinking about those lived Canadian experiences and maybe alternative forms that are identified to us through media. I'm sure Kyla has thoughts about this, but I know that's what really struck with the jury that selected her work. So after selecting her work, she had about 2 months to put together the final concept and final images for the station. And really through that tight timeline and through email, because I actually just met Kyla in person last week due to COVID and many other things, I was really struck by the considered conversations that Kyla and I had, and the thoughtfulness that she brought to thinking through what this public artwork could be. The piece that she brought forward started as, well, it is an ongoing project and exists as a physical sculptural installation. So even that hurdle of thinking through how you represent it as a photographic image on the side of a station, and then on top of that, considering all these institutions involved in the project and all their ideas about the project. So whether that's Capture Festival, Richmond Art Gallery, Richmond Public Art, In Transit BC. In Transit BC is the public-private partnership that runs Canada Line. So there's a lot of aspects to kind of navigate, and I really appreciated the conversation that happened with Kyla. And so I thought it would be really great for Kyla to share with us her experience and share with us that process that she worked through to take an already existing project and converting it into the public space. Through this process, it really made me think about how we develop public art, from that artist's initial concept to these restrictions or constrictions that lead artworks in different directions. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think it takes it to a different place. So I'm going to pass it over to Kyla to kind of to walk us through her experience. And I'll probably have questions along the way, but please add your questions to the chat or to the Q&A, and we'll get to those as we can. Yeah, welcome, Kyla, and thanks so much for being part of this. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me. I'm really, I think I'm going to just say this. I'm oddly thrilled to be able to speak about my work. And I know I think there's always a mixed bag with artists and how much they want to talk about their work, because quite often it's like, oh, it's a visual work here. And a lot of my work and also my thesis was developed around the conversation. So it's not a total surprise that I've been wanting to engage in the conversation with this work. So I'm going to show some images of the process, because the thing is the whole process of the work, it did start somewhere and it has gone through many iterations. And I think through those things and through some of the different constraints I've had in different instances, it's also really transformed the work, and it's just kind of become this living piece. So I'm just going to do a share and try to find. So like Shaun had said, this is an ongoing piece, and I feel like that's on a few levels an ongoing piece. It started with growing up and watching my mom receive gifts from people she knows, friends, different people in the community, and they were all Asian style gifts, even if they were some of them were misguided. And it was interesting. I think part of it is observing the gift giving and the, oh, thank you. And then this kind of not quite knowing what to do with it. So essentially my mom had collected, well, people gifted her objects for the last 50 years. Or even, I guess, yeah, since 1970 on, when she moved to a small farming community in the interior. And she was given all these objects throughout the years. So I've observed some of them. After I left home, she kept getting them. And so this idea came up midpoint in my master's. So we're doing an interim exhibition. And I don't know why, it just came to my mind, and I thought, oh, I should get these objects from my mom and see what I can do with them. And I think part of it was a lot of my practice has been around dealing with discrimination in my gender. And because of my last name being Bourgh and being relatively white passing, I hadn't really dealt with some of these things. I was kind of grappling with this in my master's. And I know I said at the talk that we had for the walk and talk is I cried quite a few times to my master's, but it was all really good crying that happened. It was just a lot of struggle, and I think that's a big part of the work is it's about struggle. It's about struggle with oneself. It's about struggle within communities and struggle to be heard or to be recognized or not to be recognized. So I called my mom and I said, hey, you know, the objects that people give you, can you just send them down for me? And if anyone's lived in a small town, they'll know what happens is my mom said, oh, my friend Jane's coming down and I'll just send them down with her, and you'll have to meet her in Abbotsford. Or, oh no, wait, it'll have to be Chilliwack. So you have to meet her at the mall in Chilliwack and she'll give you the boxes of objects. And I was like, okay, great. So I raced out to Chilliwack and met with Jane. She gave me these 2 boxes. And before that, I was kind of like, had thought, oh, are all these objects, is there enough? Actually, I was kind of like, are there enough things in there? So I got my mom to take photos. And so this is actually her photos that she took with her little flip phone that she had. And I just recognized that her finger is actually on one of them. in the one on the left, blocking out the two dolls. But I just said, oh, could you just send me a pic of the items? I just thought she'd just kind of put them together and then take a pic. And she actually really carefully arranged them all and like made sure that there was a few photos of these. So this actually, I was thinking about how to display the work, and one of the big things I thought was I want to display them as close as I could to what she had put out in a very similar manner. So in my master's work, I displayed it like this, and I took this photo in my studio, and I took this with my phone, and I had a very short turnaround with my work for the interim exhibition. I think we had like less than a week to kind of get an entire exhibition up, and so this is what I wanted to present. I actually had wanted to present just the objects on a table, but Emily Carr said, well, we can't get someone to sit and watch your objects. Someone might steal the objects. So there's all these things. So this was my compromise, was to do a photo. And just for a little background, especially, I think there's this perception that being part of Capture Festival is like, oh, you must be a photographer. Or, you know, I guess, I think a lot of people choose a medium. And for me, the conversation and the idea are my medium. And however I could harness those things is how I do it. So the photograph was sort of what I needed to do in this iteration. And also I did want the objects to be there. So they're like, oh, we'll find you a vitrine, you can put the objects out. And so what happened is they got me this vitrine, and it wasn't quite the size I wanted. So I ended up shoving all the objects in the box. And I thought that had this sort of resonance around this idea of being compartmentalized or being put in the box. And I did this, I mean, it's on the ground. I'm kind of playing around with how to display these pieces in there so you could see some of it, but you can't see all of it. And it still has the paper in it that my mom had wrapped all the objects in. So there's sort of this lovely conversation going between the photograph and the box of objects. And as Shaun had mentioned, the panel, and he had mentioned to me in our first conversation on Zoom, which was one of the first time we met, is, wow, the panel really loved this box. And I'm going, oh, okay, well, I have the box. I don't have the box. The box is Emily Carr's box. I have the objects. So it was interesting to rethink this. So then I was like, I can't do the photograph. We decided, I think this was one of our first kind of back and forths, was like the picture of the panorama of the objects. Actually, I think I'm sorry, I'm missing. I'm going to go for, okay, I'm kind of going sequentially, but I'm also going to jump around a bit. So yeah, having those objects out, it might have a different effect visually on the Canada Line station. So I'll just move forward and then maybe have to go back to this. But I think part of the thing about being an artist is I get bored often, and I get sometimes bored with my own work. And then I have to kind of like do something to make it more interesting for myself. So I thought, oh, you know, I'll take the objects from this, and I'm going to pitch it to this art call. And, you know, quite honestly, my goal after my master's was to put out 2 proposals a month. And this was the first one I got, and this was in October or November. So I had been like rejection after rejection after rejection, and just trying to get things out there and trying to reword stuff and trying to get feedback. So this is the image of what I proposed. I thought, oh, I'll just separate all the items, take photos of them, and then put them on the station. Because this was originally, I think the call out was for Aberdeen. So this was sort of like, I thought, oh, maybe it'll be interesting to see all these panels on there and all these things. The idea was relatively the same. But yeah, the panel was like, wow, we love this box. We love what it's doing. It's doing something very different. It's talking about a lot of different things. So then I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to have to reshoot this whole thing in a different way. Like, I have to get the box from Emily Carr somehow. I had to try to find a location that would work, which I didn't know how difficult it would be to shoot a photograph of a plexi box. So this was one of my first sort of like stabs in the dark of the work. I did a mock-up in my studio, I put it on. Oh no, this actually, I'm gonna say this is actually in my home. So, but still, lighting, reflection, which I don't mind. Taken with my phone again, because I was like really, really feeling safe about taking photos on my phone. And this just wasn't quite what we were looking for. And I know Shaun's like, I don't know what's going on with this plinth-like thing and like the sheet and the box. Like, we're not sure visually how this will work. But now that I'm looking at these, I can start seeing like kind of my trajectory forward. So, I mean, a lot of the conversations that we had was sort of like, okay, I think I have a day off in a couple days. I think I can get this shot. I'm not sure. I'll see what I can do. I think it even came down to Shaun inviting me to say, hey, he's like, oh, there's a space you could work at in the Richmond Art Gallery if you need to. As I was just panicking, I was like trying to do all these things that weren't quite, at least I got the box at this point. And then he's like, oh, okay, we can get you a camera. And I'm like, like shooting a camera I haven't used yet. It's like there's all these stumbling blocks with this. And then I was able to, a friend of mine was able to allow me to have some studio access and would allow me to and help me to shoot the series that we did. So it did kind of move forward that way. In the midst of this, Shaun was diligently writing some of the didactics and the stuff that he's like, I can draft something and send it to you. I'll get that part done because we'll throw that kind of bone to capture because that's what they kind of need first, and then you have a bit of time to do this. So I feel like we were kind of really like just I really felt like I had a lot of support with Shaun, and I don't know if I mean, I'm going to say the support you're going to have to find it in wherever you can find it. I mean, I'm very lucky that I had a friend who had access to the studio, who also contacted the person about the box. Like, so there's a lot of these kind of like having to navigate these things to make this work. The generosity of saying, come to the art gallery and you could shoot it here. Like there was a lot of support from Shaun in that realm, and also saying, okay, I'm gonna draft the write-up and check in with you about it. So I'm gonna go to this before I go to the other one, because we're talking about the didactics. So yeah, this was like a fairly close final draft. And it was really great because Shaun took my proposal and some of my, I think maybe some of the writing from my thesis, which I also took myself to put in the proposal, and basically drafted this piece. And one of the things that I had realized is that I just didn't want my part of my culture identified as in the Asian style of the work, is the fact that I wanted there to be ambiguity, and I want to challenge people in their perception around what that is. As I think I physically do, as like a physical embodiment, it does challenge some people. So this, and I'm blanking out what the blank Canadian part of my Asian background is, on purpose. And, we talked about the white passing. I said, oh, does it have a hyphen in it? Like there's sort of these things that came up, and there's also some stuff about my mom and her community. And I was like, yeah, but it's not really about pointing a finger at that community. And then Shaun was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Yep. And like got it right away. And it's like, okay, how about this? And I'm like, yeah, this sounds good. Just take out the part I blanked out, and then he did that too. I know it really challenges people because they really want to know, and maybe some people do, but does it matter? I guess that's part of it. And so this all got sent forward, which is great. It's like, okay, didactic's done, all the editing stuff with that. Now what? Shooting the image and then figuring out what to do with it. So this was sent forward, and then we got back feedback from Capture Fest, and they were like, oh, actually, I'll just say, because I didn't get that feedback, because I got through Shaun, which is great, because I really appreciate that. So he was like, hi, here are some changes Capture wants to do. Are you okay with or he's like, what do you think of these? He didn't load anything on them. He very much asked me as the artist how I was reading them. So let's see. Oh, it's not letting me move forward. There we go. So some of the changes are fairly, like have been, this is where she lives. And I guess what I'm trying to highlight is, it says through this work, the artwork considers the unconscious biases placed on her mother and how they differ from the artist's own lived experiences as someone of mixed ethnicity who is white passing, which I was like, okay. I was like, so with that. I was like, okay, like maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not really clear on what that whole white passing thing is. So just moving forward about people wanting to unpack their own stuff, from which in the mix, the diverse mixed cultures present in Richmond and in Canada at large, which I know that was definitely in my proposal. So I was trying to like bridge the whole thing. Bourgh's work raises questions about the dichotomy many people of color face between having a sense of belonging or being stereotyped within a country where many people of color families have resided for several generations. And I think I'm going to totally paraphrase my experience with this, but I think Shaun was like, what do you think of this? And I think I said, I want to go for a walk. I just need to walk and kind of like mill through this. And I showed a friend who knows the work fairly extensively, and she gave me a really particular face that was kind of like, what? And I guess the thing is what I'm trying to do, and I'm going into that dangerous zone. I'm not trying to tell you what the work is supposed to do. However, what I'm intending to express with this is that my work isn't about me being a person of color, and it's not about my mom being a person of color. And the fact that I have half of my background as considered what that would be under that framework, it only covers half of that experience, and it doesn't necessarily cover mine. And it also, and this that's on the really myopic personal level, but also I feel like that message was very much different in terms of what I was trying to communicate. And there are many families who you could say are people of color families that have resided for several generations, or even generations before colonial times, if we want to like put people in that category. But I think it was the categorization that really was that really bothered me, because I think what I'm trying to do with my work is to like break this idea of these categories all the time. And this is how sometimes I work, but I do through stories. The working at a school, and the principal comes up and he says, so I really think you should join our, we're doing sort of this anti-oppression thing, and we think you'd be great. And then he goes, it can't just be us white guys. And the thing that bothered me about that is it immediately split us, and it immediately was like pointing out these differences and I know it was meant in a certain way, but I was also like, it's about the language being divisive sometimes, how the language can be divisive and how it can be an us and them and a you and me. So some of the sort of brushing off some of the language in what I was going to do was to kind of eliminate some of the noise in that and to kind of get down to what the message was. So this was a pretty big challenge. And I think also part of it was this idea of needing to stand where my work was and making sure that I wasn't pushed off my center with it. And really trying to navigate that through the tactility. Again, I was very lucky to be able to like have someone who was my point of contact and who was able to like, because I think even this part, I was just like, so I will I'm open to having conversations because I am. I'm like, but let me know of how much I need to engage. And I'm like, if I don't have to engage, I'm fine with that. And I think that was the most kind of like not really wanting to engage that I had in all of this process, is that this part. So yeah, I was also kind of like wondering how much of the how much feedback was given from the festival, because like I was feeling as an artist that I was like, this is my vision, my view, this is what I'd like to do. So when we were getting feedback from Capture Festival, I was like, oh, this is very unusual. I because I was kind of thinking about this idea of the artist and then the work, but then it's also work that's going into a public realm. So how much do I answer to that? We did a mock-up of the work. I was told, yeah, I think the first conversation we had with you and Biljana was like about the lighting of the station, and there needing to be like a certain level of light coming through here because it's a darker station. And so I was grappling with how many to put up, how big they should be. I had no idea. So after the photo shoot I did, I came up with this series of 5, and my idea was sort of as if it was like walking around the box. So sort of this traveling around, where you'd see all the different angles. And again, this idea of it being 3-dimensional, but then with a 2-dimensional, you're not really allowed in to access it as much. So I came up with these 5, and I think I might have even taken some time off and like sat with it for a day, and like really made some hard decisions and took my time. And I was like, I don't know which ones. I did all this stuff, and then I sent it in. I was like, okay, great, done, awesome, can move forward. And I got this message back. So Capture's kind of thinking maybe 3 would be nice. And again, Shaun was like, it's your project. You can still go ahead with this, but there's the option to do them 3 and bigger. And here they actually did their own mock-up. And I was like, oh, I'm really surprised this is coming back again. So at this point, it's like the ghost ship. It just keeps returning. And so I was kind of playing around. I played around with this for a while. And then basically I was given 2, actually, I think it was 3 or 4 different ones that someone else had mocked up. And then this was sort of my final, this is one of the final decisions I had to make. So at this point, this was maybe December, I think. And I was TOCing as I do for part of the year. So I was substitute teaching in this classroom. And I kind of was like, the 5 or the 3. And then I was like, are they trying to tell me how to do the work? And like, they're choosing the 3. Am I feeling vulnerable because it's my mom's objects and they're going to be blown up really big? Like, I was going through like a roller coaster internally, and I was like, oh, what do I do? And how do I make sure I'm keeping this, my message, like making sure what I'm trying to say is in there? And so I kind of went back and forth between the 5 and the 3. And I recognized that I mean, clearly I was overthinking it. Everyone had opinions. I asked my sister, and And she's like, oh, are you okay if I show some friends at work? Yeah, that's fine. Oh, they really like these. I'm like, yeah, but those ones are too pretty and this work isn't pretty. Like, I just was like really kind of, and I'm like, this is really taken over. This is like really taken over. And then I was sitting in this classroom looking at these at lunchtime, and there's this girl that was in one of my classes, about grade 11, and I knew she was like a really savvy artist just based on her work. And I just didn't give her any context. I said, hey, can I ask you an opinion? I said, I'm doing this public work, and I'm kind of thinking like these are the two options. I didn't tell her anything about the concept. I said, visually, which one do you think's stronger? And she said, this one's stronger because the other ones are too similar a size to the panels. And that's how I decided to move forward to doing this one with the 3 is I'm like, this is too involved. I need someone very neutral to like take a look. And I do find even my teaching practice, like the students, they give me a lot back. They offer quite a bit. So I always remember that as a teacher, it's not about a top down kind of thing. It's that same level of like conversation, right? And so having that conversation with her, and the fact that I was like, yeah, I agree. You're totally right. Like awesome. I think that's kind of the important conversations to have with youth who are interested in doing art as well. So yeah, so we got to this, and then I was like, okay, I'll do the 3. Feels like this is a long journey, you guys. We're really invested in this point. And then and then I said, okay, I just my friend who helped me with the photo shoot, he was like, make sure you get test samples of the color, because what the great thing about working with that friend is like a lot of people tried to impose their perspective on it, and he was just there to just be like supportive, which is great. And he's like, yeah, just make sure the color is what you want it to be. Done. We did that. And then I think it was April 1st hit, and I'm like, I think my friend Holly was like, is your work up yet? I feel like maybe it's up or something. And so I did go out and drove out to see the work. So I actually didn't even know it was up. And yeah, it's still a little overwhelming. I think the size is perfect. I think it's exactly what it needed to be. And so this was last week, and it's a bit more like of a private pick, but my sister took this. And so the woman in the white's my mom talking to Shaun, and I'm the one with the yellow purse. And Shaun invited Zoe Chan, who's the new curator, Richmond Art Gallery. And it was really lovely to talk to Zoe, because when I was doing my studies in Emily Carr, she brought up the concept of opacity, which became a big part of this work. And so the concept of opacity is the right to refuse explaining your culture to anyone. And a lot of this is also from kind of a colonial kind of friction. So it was wonderful. I was able to be like, hey, Zoe, I remember you talking about this concept, and thank you so much, because that really enriched what I'm doing. It involved all these things. And, you just don't know when that little conversation with somebody and like the thing you go, oh, this idea, if that's going to like catapult or like change or shift someone's practice or what they're doing. So I even had a whole section about that in my thesis for my master's. And that was because of a talk that Zoe did. And I think she might've seen my work. Like they paired people up to like look at work. So yeah, or maybe even just her talk she did. And I was like, what's this opacity thing? Oh, she's like, I'm not an expert, but this is sort of the general idea. And it sent me into a different direction, I guess, too, in this work. I've hit a lot of sort of confusing walls, just asking even people at Emily Carr. I was like, hey, are there any like Asian artists who are doing stuff about these types of things, like just for my research. And I hit a lot of blanks. So like still kind of trying to get there somewhere, or to figure out to engage with that a bit more, I guess. Yeah. So that's the end of that journey.
Thanks for going on the journey with us. And I would say that I think your experience, you know, having been on other kinds of public art juries, not through the Richmond Art Gallery, and having many friends who are artists who have entered the world of public art, I think you speak to some of the challenges around timelines, around budget, around the changing physical space, about feeling out of control, that you don't have control all the time. But you know, I really appreciate the conversation we had about that text, and about these ideas around biography, and I really do see that biography seems, the art world is so caught up in biography and people stating where they're from or who they are. But honestly, for the most part, most people that come up to this piece won't even read that panel, will engage with the work just by looking at it. And so I do appreciate how you push for the writing around that work to leave it open, because I think there's obviously your intention to the work, but I think the viewers building their own connections with it also push it in different directions, and offer an openness for different interpretations. And I think maybe speak to the complexity of the issues that you're considering. So yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the final outcome of the work? Do you feel that this, in the public realm, installed on the side of the SkyTrain station, did new meanings or new ideas emerge for you about the future of this project? Or yeah, it's interesting how you think the work operates now from your initial idea, which I would have loved to do, but we didn't have the budget to have a cherry picker put up pieces high up and have many of them. But yeah, it's interesting the ways, the kind of path we went down from the first, you know, jurors' comments to you know, to Capture Festival, and kind of wanting you to consider putting 3 at a larger size. Yeah. How do you feel about the final work?
I enjoy the final work. I think the scale really has impact on that station. It was interesting. I did go to the station with a friend who noticed that there's this really interesting relationship between the plexiglass and the cement, and the station and the cement. Like those are all kind of playing off each other quite nicely. I was really enjoying the softness of the work, how it kind of had this gentleness. I thought maybe on glass and on vinyl it would have this sort of harshness. And I did say this at the other event, but I really laughed because I was approved at 50% opacity. And they said, we've approved this in 50% opacity. And I was like, well, half of me approves the 50% opacity. So there's that sense of the softness of it. The scale is still overwhelming in some ways, but I guess during my master's, the title was definitely doing a lot of the lifting in that. But I did want to work more in text. So it's kind of like having like the punchline, so to speak, or the poem just there that people could engage with. Also, I did sit out there in my car for a bit and see how many people were reading didactics.
And what did you notice?
I'm gonna say like one for 40, I think. So we have a whole bunch of people come out, and I'm like, that's about 40. Oh, wait, one person stopped. Okay, they're actually, and I'm like, I think they're reading it, and also I love that there's a translation of the didactic. I think that was one thing I wanted moving forward in the beginning. And you said, oh yeah, we do that, which I thought was great, because I just felt like that's also important for engagement, is this concept. And I appreciate what you're saying about the biography thing, about how that can shift and change sort of how we engage with the work. Yeah.
And so this project, where does it go from here for you? This collection of objects.
I'm not entirely sure where they're gonna go. I think that's part of it, is this whole concept of responses. One thing I did toy with, and I think I might have put it in the proposal, but I was thinking about how the work evoked stories from other people. Anytime I talk about this work, somebody shares a story or feels a need to share a story and then kind of want to like explain something. And even when I did the talk outside of this for the walk and talk, I remember saying that to Maria Prasad, who was the person who organized it. And I said, I mean, I'll talk for 15 minutes, but I feel like I'll also be listening to people's stories. Like, people will want to share their experience and their stories. So one thing I've been thinking about is finding some way of having, like, I don't know if it has to be a website or something where people could share their stories that are related, because I think that's a big part of the conversation too, is the relatability of it. And I told a friend about my friend Hillary about that. I have lots of friends, so I would say a friend, but being ambiguous again. But my friend Hillary, and she goes, I just want to protect you. I don't know what kind of stories people will throw at you, or if they'll be horrible to you, or whatever it is. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I can find something that'll filter like some of the stuff that doesn't need to be there. It doesn't have to be like the full internet or something. But I think that's the one thing that is sort of wanting to bring it out of the personal realm a bit more, and as it's in a public realm, which is wonderful, to be out of the private conversation and into the public conversation. That's also something that I think about, and it kind of keeps coming back, and then kind of floats away as I'm doing other things, and it kind of keeps coming back. So it's possible. Yeah. And if there's any, I don't know, if anyone ever wanted the piece, I would definitely have to say I'd have to be the caretaker of the objects. So that's definitely one thing I would have to write into any kind of thing. So yeah,
it'd be great. Oh,
go ahead.
Oh.
No, I was gonna say they're in a box in my closet right now. Couple boxes.
Well, it was great. It was great to have your mom there to kind of. I was chatting with her there. She was explaining, kind of you're talking about storytelling, but I mean, she has a story for each object, and it was a real privilege to have her there as the ultimate purveyor of the objects, the person who received the gifts, to share some of her story. So I felt very, very lucky to have that experience. But I did notice, I love what you say about storytelling. I did notice other people there really examining the objects, and I know I was even pointing out objects that I have in my house that are similar, and thinking about that idea of gift giving and sharing, which I think is it's so interesting. I think there's both positive and negative connotations that relate to this work. So it's great to leave that openness to kind of embrace both sides of it. But yeah, I didn't really get to explain of that, working with so many institutions that I, in this role, which I do off the side of my desk to support this project, it's really to almost feel like a negotiator or a in-between intermediary. you brought up between the artist and these other institutions. So, you know, even in transit has so many rules about opacity, about the content of the image. And, you know, public art of the city of Richmond, it holds the budget. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of trying to navigate all these potential hurdles and finding the best path forward with the artist. But I do feel it's important to lean into what the artist wants and try hopefully to come forward with what they perceive as their best case scenario to move forward. And I actually really love these conversations and that dialogue of the ideation of work. So I really thank you, Kyla, for having that conversation with me. Sadly, only through email, but I'm happy for that. I do want to open it up now to questions from the group. So from Emily, we have a question, maybe it's more of a comment. Your candor and honesty is so refreshing, Kyla. The process images were very insightful and the final work looks epic. Thank you for sharing the story about your artist statement versus capture editing statement. Working within the boxes of institutions, public art can be limiting. I want to ask you why you decided to make the project ongoing. Do you feel like the decision makes you almost hope that your mom receives new gifts?
Yeah, I feel like this is ongoing because the conversation isn't over. This whole conversation about yeah, even for me, the concept of having to deal with anything with my racial background is new. My mom was gifted some stuff from her friend Jane, who had brought the box, the objects down. I know, I think she was sharing that with Shaun for a while about how my mom got back after she had given all of these objects to me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to receive them. And like, you won't feel like so pigeonholed or like stereotyped by being reminded by these objects that you're Asian. And then her friend gave her one right away after she got back and was really adamant about it. And like I just really appreciated that my mom was telling that story to Shaun, because then I think he got the feeling that I got growing up, this concept of like, oh, she gave it to me, but she's so nice, but oh, it's because of and oh, it's like, it's a good friend. And I'm like, she's just so split with all of it all the time. And I think that really came through. Yeah, I think this is just a piece that perhaps because it has gone through all these iterations, it is a very fluid piece. And I think that was something I communicated from the very beginning, is that idea of there is a fluidity with what I'm trying to do. And I'm like, I mean, it sounds like I'm very fence sitting. I'm like, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not a photographer, I'm not a painter, I'm this. Maybe I'm a conceptual person, maybe I do social engagement. What is that? Like, there's sort of this thing that it sounds like it's very like avoidance, but it's also like a lot of work to kind of have to hone in all the time and work with something that's very fluid. But it's also part of my process, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy I enjoyed some of the back and forth, but sometimes just that gauging and bringing it to this level was just super important for me. It was super important for me to feel like I had a voice, and that my mom has a voice. I think that was a big part of it for me too. It was really important to invite her down this weekend for her to come and see the work. And just for her to be able to like share stories. We had a lot of sitting and listening. I did a lot of listening this weekend, just not, I listen, but I like to talk. So that was all part of it. So I think the thing is the conversation continues on. It just keeps going. Like this is just starting the conversation. It's just going to keep going. And we have lots to dig up and lots to work out. And as humans, we have a lot to like dig deep into ourselves about and to like really face and deal with. And that's not done yet. It's like far from done yet. So I think that's also a big part of my drive is that engagement. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and the chat continues.
Okay.
I just wanted to pass on some more comments. Shula is saying that they were there, I think, at the talk, and this work really engaged the crowd. There were lots of stories being shared. Heather says, so excited to see the evolution of this work. Very inspiring that has gone from your MFA studies to now gracing the public space and living on in the community. Bravo, Kyla, great talk tonight. Aaliyah, hi Kyla, not sure if you remember me. You were one of my art teachers at McNeil Secondary in 2012, 2014. After graduating, Ann Mall and I went to one of your exhibitions in Vancouver. I'm now working at Richmond Arts Center. Happy to reconnect with you and your work again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I had one final question. You know,
Sure.
Through this whole experience, what advice would you give to someone invited to create a public art piece for the first time? Or maybe in general, any advice that you would give that we're talking to other artists?
In terms of the public art and what I've experienced through this is just to really know what you're wanting to say in your work and really stand with it and know who your allies are, for sure. Don't compromise on it, but also let go of a bit of ego here and there if you need to make it actually work for the art. Just this little dance between those two. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. One thing I've been working through with myself and with students I actually had a really great conversation with this young boy in my class today. And he came up to me with his painting that is really lovely. And he just said, oh, my table group is like saying stuff. And I said, oh, what are they saying? Well, they kind of, I don't know. They're not really, they don't know, they're not sure about how my painting. And I said, well, do you value their opinion? Are they the people who are going to tell you what your work is going to be like? And he said, well, not really. I said, yeah, you have to really gauge whose opinion to value and how that can change your work, or if you're happy with what you're doing, amazing. And yeah, that was kind of our sharing today. I was like, this is a beautiful piece. I like, well, you tell me about why you enjoy it. And it was just sort of this really, I think that's also part of it is everyone can tell you how to do your work, but in the end it has to be you too, because you're the only person who's going to be able to do it. And I guess I'm going to leave it like that, I guess. I don't know.
I love that analogy. That's such a great way to kind of think through things. So
yeah,
thank you so much, Kyla, for creating this beautiful work. So everyone knows it's up for a whole year, so you can visit it many times and make connections to each object. So I encourage you, if you have not seen it, it's at Lansdowne Station. Kyla, you also run your own space and have your own events, and are there ways that people can follow you as an artist? Do you want any shout outs or any
Instagram?
I guess
probably just Instagram. So funny enough, my Instagram is Kyla Bourgh. I guess I could put it in the chat, which I found it was sort of like the fusion of my names. And I found out later that in Swedish, it means cyborg. So I feel like that might be, kind of key. I'm going to do the thing to everyone. So at Kyla Bourgh. And then I also run my own space, and that's at Atelier 818. So 8 East 18th is my address. And so I've actually, I'll say I had to isolate last 2 Februarys ago, whenever that was, when things were happening really major. I had to isolate here for 2 weeks. And basically I realized I could run an art space and a gallery out of my home because I wanted to do that project for a while. So I've hosted about 4 exhibitions so far. Some of the work here is beautiful items I get to keep temporarily, which is the whole thing that I'm going with on all this stuff around items and objects, is like that kind of the ephemeral nature of what I'm okay with in my home. But I've work by Heidi Sidhu behind me, and I have some other lovely work by Hugh Kearney, Isabel Gruley, Susan Jessop. I get to live with the work for about 3 months, which is wonderful. And then people get to buy work if they want. They can come and have private visits. I do a couple openings. I did something for World Collage Day last weekend. Was it last weekend? Had a kind of outdoor collage thing. It poured. We had tents. So everyone just sat around and collaged and talked and got to know each other. And it was sort of a public event and sort of lots of fun. Yeah. So I do that and teach and then do my own work. But it's exactly how I want it to be. So yeah. I'm really happy with that. But yeah, follow me on either of those and reach out, and super open to conversations when I can get to them. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being so candid tonight and sharing with our audience. And please follow Kyla on those 2 handles and check out Atelier when an event comes up. And we'll see everyone at our next artist salon. And thanks for all those thoughtful comments and questions. Yay, have a good evening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun.